Why Tesla's stock price plunged 200 points in one day, and and sort of the dirty details behind it. We also review the impact of the coronavirus on Tesla's production and look forward to updating you in terms of what's going on in that space. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. So today's show is a little bit unusual in that, we're starting the show and I want to switch to a public so we can do the public forum, but maybe I'll just not do that today and just upload it as discussed. So what I wanted to review today is the fact that there's an article that's come out in Reddit that described behind the scenes why it was that Tesla's stock price actually plunged. So I wanted to dive into it, but before I do, I wanted to note that we were on a cycle of everyday shows, and that cycle was kind of broken because I was traveling. I was in Baltimore, and I stayed at something called the Sheraton Hotel in the Camden Yards area. So the parking was $32 for the overnight, and when I came out to my car in the morning, my window was smashed and everything was sort of ripped out of the glove box, etc. Maybe $3 or $4 in change was stolen. So I just wanted to note that if any of you are heading to Baltimore, all of the downtown hotels have a problem right now, which is their parking garages are open on the back end so that anyone can walk in and break the windows. So both my car and the one next to me had its windows broken. I was particularly disappointed because I called the CEO's office of Marriott and they sent me to an automated line. It took me a couple $100 and 4 hours to fix that, and very, very disappointed in the response. I called the hotel. They introduced me to their loss prevention manager, who indicated that they do have this problem on occasion, and they just increased the number of patrols. And what they really need to do is just fence off the garage so that people can't just walk in off the street in there. Otherwise, while the patrol is in other locations late at night, you end up with these huge issues. So again, I don't want to flame Marriott necessarily, but pretty much every brand in that downtown area has a situation where they have these municipal parking lots that are open on the back end where they collect revenue. So they like the revenue part, but they're not interested in the liability associated with your vehicle getting broken into. And so it's a very strange situation. And I informed them that I would definitely make a point of making sure my viewers were aware of this challenge and that it might affect their willingness to stay in that area, particularly overnight, because that entire downtown is abutted by some very low-income areas and a lot of homeless people. Moving along to our show for today. I was on my way to one show and ended up at this one. What it is that I got a note a couple of days ago from one of my Reddit subscribers, or one of my Patreon supporters, and he sent me a link to a Reddit story, and it explained what happened to Tesla's stock price in its recent plunge. So as I'm going into this, I want to point out to you that you really want to be aware of the fact that we have a $20 level on our Patreon support. And I think with the fact that all the people on Patreon have been reading this story carefully for the last couple of days, I think that you're really missing out if you don't enter at that level, because you get an extra 2 shows a week, plus there are actually posts that you get that are not gotten by the folks that are just on the general subscription. So the encouragement I want you to make is that I want you to put in for your $20 level, and after a month of being there, I want you to ask the question, were you able to trade yourself to about $1 million in gains based on the information picked up there? Because this story is moving along that line. So basically, what I'm going to do, because as another note here is that we have an options trading class, and the options trading class is a one-on-one for an hour. You know, it's a $300 hourly rate that's charged while we do it, but you know, it's a one-on-one focusing on just topics affecting your level of interest in learning. So because of there being a lot of terms that you have to know if you trade options, my strategy here is to do a global sense of what happened and then walk into some of the specifics of what occurred. So basically the story is that there's a gentleman when Tesla was at $180 in the middle part of the year, like end of May, early June, there was a Tesla owner who recognized that this was a great opportunity to buy the stock. But instead of buying the stock, he purchased something called the 750 call that expires or expired on February 7th, so of this year. So at that time, he put up $150,000 for his position, and based on how well Tesla was doing, the bank who sold him that option was in jeopardy of losing perhaps several $billion on that trade. And the reason was that the trade that he did would have given him the right to buy 1 million shares of Tesla stock at $750. So every dollar above 750. So long-winded statement to say I'm trying to stay out of technical terms just so that I can get the story across and then we can get back to him. So in essence, what happened is this guy went out and put 150 grand up on Tesla, and he correctly predicted the growth in Tesla's stock price 6 months earlier and put 150K up to do it. If in fact Tesla had been allowed to stay at about $1,000 a share, possibly higher, this individual would have made $1 billion off of 150K investment. And so what happened was the bank that sort of did the other side of the trade basically demonstrated the technique that one could use to drop the stock price enough so they wouldn't have to pay out to this individual. And so among the techniques they used was they actually went out and put a story in MarketWatch, and that story helped generate, some downward momentum. And they basically went through and manipulated the stock price of Tesla lower in a very efficient way. So we wanted to sort of generally point out that this happened because one of the story ideas that we've talked a lot about is something called pinning. And what that means is if you look at Fridays on a weekly basis, and that'll include this Friday, the market makers or large institutions that sold those options need to lower the price slightly on Friday afternoons, because that lower price allows a lot of the options above that price point to expire worthless. And so basically, you can track this, and I think you might want to track it on Tesla stock. There is this pinning technique where they lower the price artificially just for Friday, and then by Monday everything can kind of gets back to normal. So I'd have to say that what I'm going to do is actually pin the article or put the link underneath so you guys can see it on Reddit as well. But I was impressed at what I saw. My thought process was that these large institutions were powerful and they could hold a stock price up for 2 or 3 days. But they, in essence, showed how over, let's say, a week-long period, there are these leverage tools that can be used by the institutions to actually guide a stock price wherever they want for a certain period of time, which is what happened with Tesla. I'm going to post the link, and I think questions will come out of it, and then we'll do another show to sort of answer the questions that people have posed. But in essence, what this shows is that options are very powerful. They can deliver unbelievable returns. It also shows that I was right. I did a show called Tesla stock goes thermonuclear, and I put a price target on by the 10th of February of $1,000 a share. And so we basically hit it until this institutional sort of manipulation of the stock price changed the game a bit. So I wanted to kind of note that to you as well. The other thing I wanted to point out is that, long-winded statement here to just point out that we pointed out that the fundamentals of Tesla hadn't changed despite the plunge in stock price. And so there were some other variables that were rolling there to impact what was happening. And it's great to be able to read about, see it, post it, so you guys can be a part of the process of understanding. And we're not sort of just all limited by what the banks want us to see and think. So I think what we're going to do, like I said, is post the link. When I'm back in the studio, we'll probably do breakouts of this and have a listing of the different techniques that were used to drop the stock price as they did. And it really raises in your mind, why Tesla, I think that's obvious here, how much money was potentially lost by Tesla shareholders as well as this individual. It's some pretty awesome stuff. I even have sort of debates going with some folks that are on our Patreon page about what prices are going to look like. And so he made an estimate of what was going to happen this coming Monday on Tesla stock price. And I was like, that stock was pinned at 750 on Friday to make sure. I mean, from a bunch of reasons, you can see that Tesla would not go over 750 this past Friday. And that's exactly what occurred. And I now understand why, and it totally makes sense. And I think you'll understand it after reading the link below as well. So the next thing I wanted to review is that there's a gentleman named Carlo who's a retired executive in the semiconductor industry that lives in southern France. And he and I have been having a debate about the impact of the coronavirus on Tesla, particularly its Chinese operations. And so basically, Carlo argued that the stock couldn't go ballistic because China would be majorly impacted by the coronavirus. And so he sent me like 20 stories and links on it over 2 or 3 days. And I was like, nah, it's still going. And in fact, obviously the stock price rose as we estimated. The other thing that happened is that I won the Pyrrhic victory of it being fine initially on the stock price. But given the Chinese government not revealing all the truth, I'm really having a hard time seeing how the Chinese operations over the next 3 to 6 months until the vaccines come out avoids damage from the coronavirus, because you have the problem of, well, if one person didn't know they had it and goes to the factory, you potentially have all these employees dying is one possibility. Another issue that pops up is, what happens to the everyday workforce? People obviously need to drive back and forth to work, et cetera, so they need cars. But there's a real freeze on everything, and I think the economic uncertainty will impact sales of everything, including automobiles, at such a high price. Because they're not allowing people on public transport or running public transport so people can get infected, I think that car-based transportation is going to be big. So that perhaps is a benefit. But just from a lot of different angles, I think the country is in a very strange place until they can get these folks vaccinated and back, to normal activities. So Carlo, I did get you in round 1, but I think you got me in round 2 in terms of what's going to end up happening in this situation. The general right now is that I think we're really in an amazingly exciting time for Tesla, because as Model Y comes and the increasing sales are in line with what Elon estimated, in that the Model Y is going to outsell all the other vehicles combined. We're really in a zone where revenue for Tesla, profit, et cetera, is going to be up. It won't be as much up without the impact of the coronavirus, but we're really looking forward to sort of diving in and going from there. I haven't been doing this, but I have a segment ad that I'm thinking about for the show, and I call it the Stanford free stuff program. So, number one, there's a free program on electrification that's held during the summer at Stanford, and I wanted to invite all of you there. We're going to have some links for that we'll be starting to post and discuss it. Major Tesla executives like the CTO have been speakers previously, and I think you'll enjoy it. Plus, it's covered by venture capitalists. My thought was to maybe organize something around that so that folks coming into town, we could arrange other things, just very low cost events nearby, so we could enhance your exposure to Stanford. The second thing that I'd like my serious viewers to do is I'd like to ask you to watch something, and that is that if you type into your Google bar Stanford and then proactive skincare, okay, again, it's Stanford and proactive skincare. What that will do is bring you to a place called the E-Corner at Stanford. As you know, Stanford has a large number of public companies that emanated from the university. So I wanted to ask you guys to go and listen into that one free podcast. The reason that I'd like to have you listen to it is for every 10 of those podcasts on that site you listen to, it's worth $1 million worth of information. So, we'll be covering more on what this is all about in the future. Even Elon, I think, is on that page a bit. So I highly recommend you check it out. It's an amazing program at Stanford. Basically, every Wednesday afternoon from 3:30 to 4:30, we have a lecture from a different venture capitalist or CEO that has Stanford ties. And you get a chance to sort of dive into their thinking and process. And it's a pretty special event on campus that's part of an engineering class. And so they videotape it and put all of them online. And while there's stuff that you see now, as we get into the new semester at Stanford and it's going on now at Stanford, but during the 8-week quarters that we have, during that 8 weeks, there's a lecture every Wednesday afternoon, and I think you guys will find it pretty awesome, and looking forward to your comments on it. The article I'm talking about is I believe her name is Katie Roden. She's a Stanford dermatology doc, and she explains how they put proactive skincare together. And what's awesome about that show is it really shows the fundamentals of great business and how you might want to learn more about it. The final thing that I'd like to cover today is a lot of folks have asked me about my background based on some of the stuff we cover. A few highlights would be I went to Stanford undergrad. I did kind of an entrepreneurship, somewhat of an MBA, somewhat of a certificate program at Dartmouth at their Tuck School. And then my background is primarily in investments and finance. I worked at Fisher Investments. Out of undergrad, I worked at Forbes magazine and a number of journalistic situations in internships, et cetera. But then after that, I actually worked for Franklin Templeton Group. It was a brief stay, but I did work there and really developed an interest in the markets and trading and investing, and became a fairly hardcore trader for about 5 years, mostly on my own. I also have experience of about a year working at Fisher Investments. I was part of a team at that time. Fisher was managing, I believe, they were at about $5 billion under management. And I was part of a team that helped manage that portfolio, not making key decisions, but every aspect of trading, marketing, everything was part of what I was being trained in there as a potential manager of a new division of the firm. So mostly investing and trading, but I've sort of moved on to do things in certainly in entrepreneurship, but also in commercial and residential real estate in terms of deals, which is primarily what I'm working on now. And I love cars. I think Tesla's awesome, and it's really fun to be able to grow a channel in that space. I'd say the most notable resume builder for me is that I have 3 companies that I helped get financing and out the door, all of which have turned out pretty successfully. The most famous of which is JetBlue. I met the CEO and CFO in Palo Alto near Stanford, and they couldn't get financing in New York. So I kind of walked them through the process of getting access to capital from venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. And that process yielded the financing they needed to create and build the airline. So that's a general sketch of my background. Happy to answer more if there's any interest. At any rate, I want to remind you also we're getting our SpaceX group together to head out to California the first week of April. If there's interest in IPO shares in preparation, we are doing that effort, and let us know if you have an interest in that. I was at the front of the show, I was a little hesitant because when we do live shows, we can either choose to immediately load up as live and have questions and comments coming through, or we can go load up and then have a chance to sort of document and add links and so forth, and then go live. So because the Reddit piece link is so important on the show, and it really drives everything about the show of value, I wanted to encourage you to watch our show, maybe stop it in the middle, go down, read this link, and then come back and watch the rest of the show, because a lot of the technical terms, there's a lot of technical terms. The general idea of what happened is better explained, I think, there. And then what's going to happen is that if we get a lot of questions and comments after the show, we'll go ahead and maybe do another show following up on questions and comments that you may have had. This also illustrates the point that understanding options and being able to possibly do some trading in them can be very lucrative, especially on stocks like Tesla that move around a lot. At any rate, just our health tips as usual. Don't forget, no more than once a week for fried foods. Don't forget, try our 2-week go to bed at the same time every day, and therefore wake up at the same time, as a way to get your body into a certain circadian rhythm that'll be ideal for you. Want to also encourage you to not eat within 2 hours of going to bed, preferably 4. Let the food digest so it doesn't cause upper respiratory cancer. And then finally, I was going to just throw in there at least a 30 SPF or greater every day to avoid issues in that regard as well. At any rate, I want to thank you for taking time out. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, German, au revoir, French, Lihitro, Hoda, Hebrew, Hoda Hafez, Farsi, Hejdo, Swedish, Zdravstvuyte, hello in Russian, Das Vidanya, goodbye in Polish, and Ni Hao Ma in Chinese. We're praying for you guys over there. I hope this finally works out to everybody's favor. Thanks once again for joining us, and have a great day, and bye for now.